Hi everyone, I'm Danielle Byington, and in this video, we're going to talk about Christopher Marlowe's biography. Christopher Marlowe is born in 1564, which is important to note because he's born 2 months before Shakespeare. You cannot possibly talk about Christopher Marlowe without talking about Shakespeare because of the authorship controversy. Um, as you'll see when I go into some of the next slides talking about his suspicious death, with the in which there's not a lot of solid documentation. There has been a long ongoing debate about did Marlowe contribute to some of Shakespeare's plays? And it's not even really necessarily just an academic argument. It has kind of bunny trailed over time into the kind of conspiracy theory realm. I mean, like we're talking tinfoil hat stuff, really crazy conspiracies about it all. But I'm mentioning that about Shakespeare because we do believe that they were contemporaries, that they probably knew each other because they were both writing in the London theater scene at the same time. Now, Marlowe was famous for a briefer time, obviously, because he dies young, but we'll get into that in a moment. Now, the two playwrights also share some parallels in their biography. They come from, being commoners, kind of lower middle class, because, as you know from my other videos, Shakespeare's father was a glove maker, and here Marlowe's father was a cobbler, and Marlowe is also one of nine children, so that's a lot of mouths to feed. Uh, but he obtains a scholarship to attend grammar school at what's called King's School. I'll show you that on Google Maps in a moment. And so that's also very similar to Shakespeare's biography, in which he attends a grammar school. So, the difference between the two, though, and this is where you start to get some of the authorship controversy, where it comes from a place of elitism, is that Marlowe got to attend university. He went to Corpus Christi College for his Master of Arts degree, and Shakespeare did not attend university. And so the large argument about Shakespeare couldn't have written those plays. He was just a country boy from a rural town, Stratford upon Avon. He wouldn't have been able to write those. Well, with a grammar school education, he could have. I think today, when you think of what you learn in your sort of, let's say, K through 12, all of those years, it kind of pales in comparison to the quite hefty load of culture and reading that and languages that would have been taught in, say, a grammar school in the age of Shakespeare here in the early modern period. So it totally would have been possible. And so this is why we kind of think the argument that Shakespeare couldn't have possibly written the plays because he didn't attend university is rather ludicrous. That's, like I said, that comes from a place of elitism because, as we know, many successful people today have been able to accomplish very radical things without a college education. The bit about Marlowe going to college, however, he was studying to be, it seems, an Anglican clergyman, and he goes the full length of time of the scholarship, which was 6 years, and then in the seventh year, he requested like to obtain his degree, but he hadn't completed coursework, it seems. And at first, the college wants to deny giving him his degree because there were rumors. This is part of some of all the rumors surrounding his strange death. That he actually was Catholic, that he supported a Catholic cause. And that's also really kind of seems kind of bogus because he also was blatantly an atheist and talked about atheism philosophies. So, um, either way, either of those two things really would make the college not want to confer Marlowe's degree, but it's also that someone from the court seems to step in and say, well, don't forget about his service to the queen, quote unquote. And that is pointing to his work, we believe, in espionage for the court. So we're not exactly what he was doing as a spy. There are all kinds of theories about it. But because of that, the queen kind of, the court makes sure that he does get his Master of Arts degree. Now, he obviously doesn't go on to become an Anglican clergyman. He is quite radically different because I think now sort of modality of the arts. But at this time, theater had just come back and, in its secular form. And actually, the Playhouse, where I'll show you on a slide in a moment, where Marlowe's plays would have been performed was the Rose Theater, the Rose Playhouse, as it was called. And it was the first purpose-built theater in that area of London because there hadn't been theaters like purpose for that purpose, structure built for performance for almost 1,000 years, like since Greek drama, because you have this whole thing where back in the ancient Greek world, when plays were performed, it was part of state religion. It was honoring the god Dionysus. And eventually, as Christianity spreads across the continent, they're like, wait a second. When we're doing these plays, this is talking about all these pagan gods and honoring them. We can't do this anymore. And so it's for about 1,000 years, and you can see this also if you look at my video on the medieval play Everyman. The plays, when they do resurface, when we do have, or I shouldn't say resurface, when the practice of performance resurfaces, um, it's it's things like morality plays. It's meant to have a Christian moral of the story, or they are kind of doing sketches of stories from the Bible. And then by the 1500s, in the early 1500s with Erasmus, you have the vogue of translating those Greek plays that we used to have, and then they're performing those. And then people start making up their own stories, and then you start to have the secular stories like those that, like Romeo and Juliet or like Hamlet. So Marlowe is in this and famous for it right as Shakespeare is beginning. Now, Marlowe is arguably the most famous tragedy writer, but before Shakespeare really takes off. Then it's because he has such a short life. He's only a famous playwright for about 6 years in London. Well, a lot of his plays, now, it's very obvious who the overreacher is in Dr. Faustus. It's Dr. Faustus. So all of his plays, though, seem to have, many of his plays have a main character who has this overreaching quality. It gets them in trouble, and um, many times the playwrights, when they're working with their acting troupe, their same actors, they were always in all their cast, whoever the lead is, or whoever is the young boy who plays the female roles, because it was illegal for women to act on the stage, or who was the lead comic actor, all of those types of roles. The playwright wrote the parts around their actor in their acting troupe that they worked with. And for Marlowe, that was the Admiral's Men. The lead actor was Edward Allen, and he was quite tall for his time. If you ever watch archaeology sorts of documentaries or biographies from way back when, like this time period in the early early modern era, it seems like people are just a little bit shorter than today in the 21st century. That's mostly related to nutrition issues, malnutrition, or well, not necessarily malnutrition, or just, not getting as much as we are now, where we have accessibility, more wider accessibility to foods, nourishing foods. So Edward Allen was reportedly a little over 6 feet tall, which was like a big deal back then. And so Marlowe's characters often have this overreaching quality. Now, this quote unquote service to the queen, which we assume was his espionage, when he's working as a spy, we one of the most common theories, I should say, is that we believe it contributed possibly and somehow to his death. His death starts essentially reportedly with a fight over a bar tab at an inn in Deptford, a section of London. And he's stabbed in the eye. He dies slowly, dies the next day. He's only 29 years old. So we also kind of say he's kind of the live fast, die young of the crowd. He's like the Kurt Cobain of the crowd. Even though he's not, I know he's not in the 27 club, but still 29, quite young. So there are many other theories. There are about 10 common popular ones, some that he faked his own death to escape either something pertaining to Catholicism, to him being an atheist, some other sorts of trouble that he got into on the continent working as a spy. So any of those sorts of those theories, it is very interesting, and I think especially in the States, there seems to be this glamour and fashion attached to conspiracy theories. Please don't go down that rabbit hole with Christopher Marlowe. Um, I think it's kind of hard for our culture today to understand that there wasn't always necessarily just this singular authorship at this time, and especially with plays, because, like I said a moment ago, these just kind of came back into vogue to write your own original play, and it's a secular story. So people weren't doing it to just write it and print it. These didn't come about to only be read. And if you look up the history of many of these plays, they weren't even published or printed um, until a few years after the first reported performances. So it was all about it being a performance. So that means you might have some collaboration going on between the directors, the writers, the actors. If you look at a more common example, if you look at some of Shakespeare's facsimiles, say like the quartos versus the folio. So the different versions of these plays printed, the words are different, the lines are different because they weren't writing all of this down. Some of this was being purported from the actors who had memorized all the lines when they performed in the plays. So, um, this the overall consensus that most people can agree on is that there just wasn't really necessarily a type of singular authorship on a large scale. We believe that it was collaboration. We have this today in creative writing workshops where you have the piece you've written and maybe like a handful of people in your group or a whole class, they review it and they give you suggestions of here's what's working, here's what you could improve. It's things like that. And then if the author makes those edits today, it's just going to be that one author's name on the book or the poem or whatever it is. But at that time, they're doing it collaboratively. So it really is like just maybe a particular name is a buzz name among the audience goers going and seeing these plays. And so that's how over time one name alone gets attached to a play. But linguistically, you can look at the scholarship of some people who are really big in that field of studying the commonly used phrases and images of these writers, not so Marlowe, Shakespeare, Thomas Nash, Thomas Kidd, uh, contemporaries of theirs, of which we try to put a label on who wrote what in what play. So this might be an older version of this might be something like Caroline Spurgeon, where she's not really talking about authorship, but she's talking about how Shakespeare has these certain types of portrayals of certain images, things like animals and water. The way he talks about it is going to look different than the way someone like Marlowe talks about it, because Shakespeare grew up in the countryside and Marlowe did not. Um, but some contemporary scholarship that might be like Gabriel Egan or Gary Taylor. This is the first couple names that come to mind, in which they use today linguistic software to kind of pinpoint and find these parallels of phrasings or descriptions of images and things like that, to say, oh well, this guy said it in a lot of his plays, and we have that occurring in this play. So maybe he collaborated on this play with Marlowe or whoever it is we happen to be talking about. Now, the plays themselves, where they were performed, I said the Rose Playhouse. This was the first purpose-built theater on that in that area, Bankside, London. I have a little map of that. It's certainly not Google Maps. We'll get there in just a second. But over here, dead in the center, it says the Playhouse. So we are literally looking at the Rose Playhouse. So up at the top, all those little squiggles, it's representing the Thames River. Um, you have another. You can see some other words above the Playhouse. That's a bear garden, and that is talking about a place where there would be bear fights. So it could be things. This is like really grotesque, gruesome stuff, like stuff out of the Roman Colosseum. You might have cockfights, dog fights, bear fights, as in maybe a pack of dogs versus a bear, and people are making bets on who's going to win or how long, and on and on. So this goes also along with the thing I said a moment ago. Well, now we might think of theater as being this kind of highbrow thing, but theater was thought of as kind of cringe by some people back in this time period. Now, let me go to Google Maps to kind of make say a little more about that for a second. Okay, so I am going to show you a couple things in Canterbury real quick, where Marlowe was born, and I want to show you that because, as you've seen in my other videos, or if you're a student in my class, specifically Brit Lit 1, we've been to Canterbury before when we talked about the Canterbury Tales. So here we are. There's the continent of Europe there, and then there's the United Kingdom. So right there, that southeastern foot there, that is the county of Kent. You have Canterbury. So this first thing I have highlighted, called St. George's Tower, this is actually, get in there. This is actually the remains of the church where Christopher Marlowe was baptized. So that's considered kind of a big deal, because it's like, hey, here's where, because they would do it within, I think the custom is about 3 days after birth. This marks the beginning of the documentation of this famous playwright's existence. Now, it's only a tower that's left because the Nazis bombed when the Nazis were bombing England and during the air raids. Unfortunately, they lost most of the church, and except for this tower that remains. And walk through it, there are still graves of people inside of it, under, like, on the floor underneath. Um, I'm also going to show you King's School, where he went. So there is King School. I'll have a better picture of that for you in the PowerPoint if you are a student in my course. Now we're going to go up to London. I get back way out so I can see where we are. Let me just go ahead and search Rose Theater. It's called the Rose Theater Trust. All right, so you know that picture, that 1593 map that we were just looking at? This is kind of the same thing. Now, something that's different as you're looking at this now is that the water is farther down because by the Victorian era, they put concrete walls up to contain the River Thames here because in the age of Shakespeare, they had a problem with flooding in which it would come all the way up here. So this is a replica of Shakespeare's Globe Theater. So that's built after the Rose Theater. We'll talk about that in my Shakespeare video. Um, but it was originally further back, like the Rose Theater, because the water would come up here on Bankside, as it's called. And I am looking for now Anchor or Bankside. Okay, so there's the Rose Theater Trust. Oh no, didn't mean to do that. Sorry, I wanted to highlight this for you so you can see where it is while I'm talking about it. So the Rose Theater Trust right here that I was just talking about. And then this place called Anchor Bakeside. So this actually, before this was a bar for a long time, for a few centuries, this was one of many, a row of brothels that went down the river here. And as you see, then over here a little further to the east, this place called the Clink, this was the main prison. And it was also, though, the seat of the Bishop of Winchester. And the Bishop of Winchester managed all of this big row of brothels that was down through here. And so you've got brothels right next door to the theaters are being built. And so you have gambling, you have prostitution, you have murder, and you have theater all in this one area in that time period. So and oh the bear garden with the dog fights and such. So you can see how theater wasn't associated as being this fancy thing. And it really is sort of because the Queen, Elizabeth the First, thank goodness she was open-minded and very educated and cultured. She took a liking very much to theater, and that kind of helps elevate it when she's starts attending these performances. So, and if she has someone like Christopher Marlowe actually working for her, that's going to affect, the way the public's is perceiving, kind of shape the way the public is perceiving theater. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to the PowerPoint for just one more second, just to give you a comparison one more time. So with the Rose Theater and the Anchor Bankside, which was, like I said, it was a brothel at the time, and you had a row of them down the Bankside. When I come back to this, so there's the Playhouse, and there let's enlarge the whole thing, that whole row of houses. They look like houses. They're brothels right there. That's what you were seeing compared to the modern map I just showed you on Google Maps. Okay, so that's all for Christopher Marlowe's bio. Thank you for watching.